A very warm good evening. Today, we are delighted to have among us Miss Parinaz Madan, our speaker for the day. She will be sharing her insights on the topic strategies for becoming a standout law firm intern. To begin, please allow me to introduce our esteemed speaker. Miss Parinaz Madan graduated as a lawyer from Government Law College, Mumbai in 2011 and has been designated as a solicitor since 2014. She started her career by working in the corporate law team of Crawford, Bailey and Co., a leading Mumbai-based law firm. Thereafter, she accepted a position as an independent legal advisor to the Mahindra Group, where she worked on a host of corporate and commercial law matters. Subsequently, she accepted a consulting opportunity at L'Oreal India Private Limited. Upon completing her assignment with L'Oreal, Ms. Parinaz Madan was appointed as a principal associate at Anoma Legal, a multi-specialty Indian law firm. As principal associate at Anoma Legal, Ms. Madan provides legal counsel to a wide spectrum of clients ranging from e-commerce unicorns to leading fintech and climate action companies. In addition to general corporate and commercial advisory work, she is actively involved in the firm's research and pro bono initiatives. Ms. Madan has been a member of I Pro Bono since 2016. She has counseled various NGOs on a host of education, child rights, and medical laws in India. In 2020, she wrote one of the first definitive legal research papers on drafting effective child protection policies for civil society organizations in India, following which she was consulted by representatives from UNICEF and Enfold India for her views on the draft of a state level child protection policy. Today, Ms. Martin will be guiding us on navigating internships from the perspective of recruiting law firms. As students, we often feel that a huge chasm exists between the curriculum taught in law college and the practical skills required to succeed at a law firm. Yet, there are very few credible resources that we can lean on for advice in this domain. As the placement committee of GLC, we have endeavored to ease this difficult transition from being a law student to law intern. Therefore, this session aims to explore various approaches to internships and offer valuable insights to our students. While the lecture is primarily aimed at interns, all kinds of early stage law firm professionals would also benefit from listening to it. Ma'am, it is truly a privilege to have you with us today. We look forward to an insightful session. Now, without further ado, let us extend a warm welcome to Ms. Parinaz Madan to share her expertise and guide us through this significant topic. Ma'am, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your kind introduction, Rishita. And I really want to express my profound gratitude to the Placement Committee of Government Law College for this opportunity to address an incredibly important topic. Now, as you said, my subject for today is strategies for becoming a standout law firm intern. Now, as each of you embarks on your internship journey, I am sure you're navigating a whole array of bittersweet emotions, right? From exhilaration at starting one of the most formative experiences of your legal career to nervousness about whether you will really measure up to the task. And honestly, it's perfectly natural to feel that way. Now, as Rishita mentioned previously, our legal education does not fully equip us with the resources and confidence that's needed to thrive in this fast-paced and hyper-competitive law firm world. And so we decided to address this topic by way of a lecture today. Now, having been on both sides of the spectrum, first working as a law firm intern myself and now engaging with a lot of interns personally, I intend to share 10 critical strategies for becoming a successful law firm intern with you today. Now, in true lawyer fashion, a few clarifying and precautionary remarks before I start. Firstly, this presentation is primarily intended for present and prospective interns at corporate and commercial law firms, because quite frankly, that is the area that I am most acquainted with. So students who wish to join pure litigation practice may be better suited looking for guidance elsewhere. Although I think some of the strategies that I've outlined in my presentation should work equally well in the litigation domain too. Secondly, there is no universal one-size-fits-all solution for excelling at an internship, as it's a highly subjective matter which depends on a host of variable factors like the dynamics of your law firm, the particular practice area that you choose, and above everything else, your own individual goals. So you're welcome to take from this presentation whatever resonates with you for your particular individual circumstances and discard what is irrelevant. And let me make a small confession here, okay? A lot of advice that I'm dispensing today comes with the benefit of hindsight. Let me tell you this clearly and unequivocally. None of us started out as perfect interns, okay? That concept of perfect interns really does not exist. Most of us have felt deeply confused, unprepared, and frankly overwhelmed on a number of occasions in our internships. And sometimes we have seriously wondered whether our bosses or clients were speaking to us in Greek or Latin on some kind of unfathomable code. But I have lived to tell the tale, and hopefully, so will all of you. So, with that confession out of the way, let's get right to the heart of it all. What are the kinds of tasks that you can reasonably expect when you're interning at a corporate law firm? Now, a little spoiler alert here. I can vouch for the fact that it's certainly not half as glamorous as it is made out to be in your American TV shows like Suits. So, as you can see on this slide, I have outlined a few broad categories of work that you could potentially be asked to handle at your firm. So, first, you have the very basic but essential task of summarizing and analyzing judgments and legal documents. Then, next come the research heavy tasks like creating notes, articles, presentations, and papers. This could be either for your firm's internal consumption or for external publications. Next, there is drafting a whole bunch of formal communications. So, you have your letters, emails, legal notices, and the like. Then, as time passes, if your seniors trust you enough, and hopefully they do, you may be involved in drafting and reviewing agreements, legal opinions, and business policies for companies, and even participating actively in negotiations for clients. And finally, you must be prepared to do tons and tons of proofreading, whether it's for legal documents, articles, correspondence, or agreements. And then, of course, the list that I put out on the slide is not exhaustive. Over and above what I've stated in this slide, you may be roped in to participate in a whole gamut of other tasks like conducting due diligence on a company in an M&A transaction, or simply providing administrative support to your team. Now, whether that's by way of technology management, or even it could be something as simple as sending an invoice to your firm's client. I will also add here that your daily work is going to involve a copious amount of Microsoft Word usage, especially track changes. So get used to it. And of course, occasionally PowerPoint and Excel. And trust me when I say this, you're sure to win some extra brownie points at your firm if you know your way around spreadsheets, because most of us frankly don't. Additionally, knowing regional languages could make you a huge asset to your firm, especially for client communications or translating government notifications. So this sets the stage for diving into my 10 recommended strategies for acing law firm internships. Now, while there are hundreds of strategies out there and I could spend days and days going on about them, I have highlighted the 10 that I personally find most impactful. The first strategy basically requires you to channel your inner detective. So think like Sherlock Holmes, okay? In that, please do your background research on the law firm that you're planning on interning with, including its partners and practice areas. Now, this has become increasingly achievable with the enormous wealth of online resources that you have at your disposal. In my times when I was interning, a lot of this information was hidden behind opaque doors and not readily accessible. So examine the firm's website if it has one, LinkedIn profiles of the relevant partners, and news articles in which the firm has featured. Also, at the time of your internship interview, it is very likely that some clues have already been thrown your way about what your work would primarily consist of, the kind of clients and practice areas that you will engage with, and so on and so forth. So please reflect on these conversations and start exploring articles, blogs, judgments, videos, and podcasts on the relevant subjects. Now, for instance, if you know that celebrity endorsement agreements are the bread and butter for your firm, then it's essential that you begin familiarizing yourself with the legal landscape surrounding such agreements, including the relevant consumer protection laws, intellectual property laws, the ASCII code, endorsement agreement templates, and of course, landmark judgments on the topic. Obviously, it goes without saying that you won't be able to read everything under the sun in a short period of time. But even a working familiarity with some aspects of the firm's practice areas will give you a great jumpstart in your internship. And lastly, it always helps to get an insider's perspective on the firm. Okay, so feel free to speak with past and current interns, associates, partners to get a good understanding of the work culture and ethos of the firm. And on a lighter note, by these conversations, you might just uncover the most unexpected quirks of your future colleagues, like a partner who will only speak in Bollywood metaphors. So this is the kind of useful intel that you certainly won't find out from the firm's website. Okay. Now, the second strategy is to sharpen your summarizing and note-taking skills. There is a quote that's widely attributed to Franz Kafka, who, as most of you know, was a renowned author and lawyer by training. And it goes something like this: a lawyer is a person who writes a 10,000 word document and calls it a brief. Now, while we don't know conclusively whether he actually said those words himself, I think it remains a very clever and pertinent quote nevertheless. Clients routinely lament about the lack of brevity and simplicity in legal documents. And this is precisely why a lawyer who can distill the essence of a matter in lucid language stands out. So, one of the most critical skills to learn at the start of your career is the art of summarizing, which is essentially sifting the wheat from the chaff, as this picture here depicts. This skill can come in handy in a host of tasks which are routinely assigned to interns. So, whether it's summarizing judgments, agreements, terms of a license, or even correspondence exchanged between the parties. And while learning the skill is no rocket science, in my experience, a lot of interns tend to do a shoddy job of it, mostly for lack of practice. So, make sure to get as much summarizing practice as possible before you commence your internship. Now, for starters, you can review judgment summaries that reputed law firms put up on their websites or blogs for public dissemination and study the formats that they adopt. As a rule of thumb, try to ensure that your summary that you are preparing speaks for itself without any need for the reader to refer to the original document, and that it is clear, precise, and obviously brief. On a similar theme, another crucial skill that interns need to get a grasp on is the art of effective note taking. So, whether you are taking a client brief for attending a legal conference, um, quick and efficient note taking will keep you laser focused on the critical points of the subject and ensure that you have a somewhat enduring record of the matter, right? Because honestly, sometimes our memories can suddenly fail us because they tend to be unreliable allies, especially as we grow older. So use whatever system works for you. Some people swear by this system called the Cornell system of note taking, and you can, of course, feel free to look it up in detail online. It basically involves dividing a notepad into three sections. So the first is Q, where you write down the questions. The second one is notes, where you write down the facts of a matter. And the third one is summary, where you sum up what you have learned or observed. Okay. You can obviously use something less elaborate depending on the kind of brief you're taking. Personally, for most of my tasks, I just use something as simple as the Notes app on Mac. Now, a word of caution here. I am well aware that the market is flooded with AI-powered note-taking and recording tools. But do keep in mind that a lot of times these can be highly, highly undependable, especially as they are in their current form. For instance, they may summarize a meeting without taking into account certain nuances in the conversation or offer a summary which is riddled with errors. And I have personally seen this happen on more occasions than one. Importantly, AI-powered note-taking tools could raise serious privacy and confidentiality issues, particularly for sensitive client matters. So please keep this in mind. And if you absolutely must use such AI recording tools, do so with prudence and only after obtaining the necessary consents from the parties involved. I think this is a very important safeguard to keep in mind. Okay. Now, strategy number 3 is to comprehend the scope of the task assigned to you thoroughly and also to understand the manner of its execution. Now, this may sound very commonsensical, but not following this step is a surefire way to get off on the wrong foot with your seniors at a law firm, or even your client for that matter. Okay, so imagine if a client comes to you and says, please help us draft an agreement for engaging with an HR expert for our company. Okay. And without asking the client any further questions, you spend 3 days drafting a very elaborate 15 pages employment agreement after consulting the relevant shops and establishment laws and listing every possible employee statutory benefit known to humankind. Okay. You're very proud of your work product until you show the agreement to your client and the client says, oh, we just needed a simple 2 pages consultant agreement for a short project and not a comprehensive employee agreement. Okay. So this is a classic example of how misunderstanding the scope of work can result in a colossal waste of your time and effort and deliver exactly what the client did not need. And sometimes not understanding the scope of work may genuinely not be the intern's fault. It could very well be attributable to the lack of time or patience that your senior client has on a particular day, right? So, what is it that you can do? First of all, I believe being an active listener and note taker will certainly work to your advantage. So, after your senior client finishes the briefing, you should summarize your understanding of the deliverables and confirm with him or her as to whether your interpretation is correct. If you can put all this on an email or message, even better. Another tip is to ensure that the brief that you receive addresses the cardinal questions of who, what, when, where, why, and how. Okay, these are questions often taught to students of journalism, but I believe they are equally relevant to the legal profession. For example, if it's an agreement, who are the parties involved? What arrangement are they seeking to establish? When and where do they propose to execute it? Why are they entering into the agreement? And how are they going to outline the terms and conditions, their rights and obligations, etc.? Now, more often than not, you may not get all the answers straight away at the start when you begin your work, but make sure that you have them in place sometime before you finalize the draft. And I cannot stress this enough. Please know the audience of your work. This becomes especially important when you are handling research tasks. For example, a research note that's prepared for a lawyer should obviously read very differently from one that is meant for a business executive with no legal training, right? In the latter, you will have to simplify the language, avoid legal jargon as much as is possible, and focus more on the practical takeaway rather than the legal theory. Another important thing is to get clarity on the timelines of the deliverables. Now, as you all know, since most tasks in our field are time sensitive, it's extremely crucial to clarify timeline expectations in order to avoid any kind of unpleasant surprises at the last minute. Also, my personal view is that at your stage and when you're an intern, it's wise to not overcommit to unrealistic deadlines and then underdeliver, right? Because you're just starting to learn the ropes of the profession. And finally, always inquire with your senior as to whether there are any templates and resources that are already in place which you could readily refer to so that you're not reinventing the wheel, you see. It also makes sense to ask whether there are any law firm house styles that you need to adhere to in terms of format, font, etc. Now, I would like to add here that embarking on any new assignment can often feel like navigating a maze full of unexpected twists and turns. And this is true for most seasoned lawyers, not just interns. But if you follow the simple tips mentioned in this slide for understanding what is truly expected out of you, you will find that half the battle is already won. Coming to tip number 4, which is to utilize the right research resources. Now, as an intern, one of the key tasks that you can anticipate being assigned frequently is legal research. Okay, I distinctly remember as an intern being handed such mind-bending legal questions that I would often find myself ruminating over them, even in my sleep late in the night. Now, legal research is truly like solving a jigsaw puzzle, given how complicated and dynamic our laws tend to be, right? But the more pieces of the puzzle that you find, the clearer the bigger picture becomes. Which brings us to the question of how should we go about finding these right pieces, right? Now, as you know, you probably have studied this in law college. Broadly, there are two types of legal research resources, primary and secondary. So primary resources consist of the Constitution of India, your bare acts, judicial decisions, government rules, regulations, notifications, and so on. Secondary legal resources are those that comment on, critique, or analyze the primary sources. So your legal commentary books, research papers, policy reports, white papers, journal articles, blogs, etc. These are secondary resources. So depending on the kind of query that comes your way, starting with a general Google search and reviewing, news articles and law firm insights on the topic is a good idea. But you must learn to distinguish between credible resources and unreliable ones. And always keep this in mind. If you are reading something in the news or any online resource, don't take its veracity for granted unless you verify and fact check it thoroughly. Now, as most of you probably know, there are some news resources that provide good coverage of corporate legal news in India. So you have NDTV Profit, you have Economic Times Legal, you have Mint, Bar and Bench, Business Standard, and you can use them not just for research, but also to keep abreast with developments in the legal sector. And I cannot emphasize this enough. Please never ever formulate your final research opinion without considering the provisions of the Bare Act. Okay, this is very important. And why? Because the Bare Act is the most original and unvarnished version of the law. So you cannot ignore it. Okay? You may, of course, also need to seek specialized commentary books and dictionaries for certain subjects. And oftentimes these are housed in your own law firm library. Of course, you have online tools like Manupatra, which are quite useful for digging out critical judgments. And another nifty tool that I have found particularly useful for labor law recently is something called Simpliance. I'm sure there are many others as well, but these are the ones that I routinely employ. Then, as most of you are aware, you can always harness law firm blogs, articles, videos, and podcasts to add new dimensions to your research. Another valuable resource that I think helps massively in getting a comprehensive overview of a specific research topic is something called comparative guides. Okay. These guides contain actionable insights into a particular area of law. So, for example, data privacy or environment protection laws in India. And they are generally authored by reputed law firms and are mostly available online for free. I have personally found them to be quite illuminating, particularly, I would say, for emerging and cross border legal issues. Now, speaking of resources, there is one question that I get asked very often by interns, and that is which books and sources can we reliably use for drafting agreements, particularly, your general corporate and commercial contracts. I would wholeheartedly recommend the books outlined on the slide for basic templates in contract drafting. It goes without saying that you have to use the templates as skeletal drafts and obviously tailor them to suit your client's requirements, right? But they can serve as good starting points for your drafting exercise. So the first book that you see is Drafting, Pleading, Conveyancing, and Professional Ethics by Jadwala. I think this is something you all have already purchased as part of your law college curriculum, and I think it's a useful, starting document or starting book for beginners. The second book, called Law and Practice of Conveyancing, Deeds and Documents by Tijoriwala and Vima Dalal, is one that's widely used as a gold standard for drafting in many law firms and has even been an integral part of the solicitor's curriculum in Mumbai. In fact, I often reach out to this book for guidance even today. And I find it to be one of the most trustworthy books for drafting contracts in the Indian context. There's also a third book that I've put out here called Tolley's Commercial Contracts, Transactions, and Precedents. This is based on English law, but has a number of useful commercial precedents which can be adapted to the Indian context with appropriate modifications. And then the other resource which I've used sometimes is Practical Law by Thomson Reuters. I'm sure some of you have used it already. If your law firm has a subscription to this resource, you will actually find a number of reliable agreement and policy templates created by both Indian and foreign lawyers. See, you can also use the numerous templates that are freely available online. But do keep in mind that most of these are rooted in foreign laws, okay, and should only be used after making appropriate modifications in the Indian context. Now, I will conclude this slide by saying that I have no affiliation with any of the resources I have mentioned in this slide or the previous one. I'm just sharing them with you purely based on their usefulness to my practice areas. Now, trick of the trade number 6 is to invest in practical courses that would not only deepen your understanding of your law firm's core practice areas, but would also address any skill gaps that you may have. So say your law firm's team specializes in competition law, M&A law, or intellectual property law, try to find courses that offer practical and not merely theoretical insights into these subjects, and those that are preferably conducted by real-world practitioners. That way, you will not feel completely lost on day one of your internship, right? Secondly, if after undertaking an honest self-assessment, you think that a certain skill, like say written communications, is not your strong suit, look up courses that could help you improve in this very critical area. And you will ask, where can we find these courses? Everywhere, from your college notice boards, Chamber of Commerce announcements, to the websites of international organizations, and of course, online course providers like edX and Coursera. In fact, platforms like edX and Coursera allow you to audit most courses for free. And if you input a skill, say like conducting effective negotiations, which to my mind is one of the most vital skills for a lawyer to possess, you will see a wide variety of courses on that subject. In fact, there was also a course offered by the University of Michigan and Coursera that I had taken some years ago on the interplay between strategy, law, and ethics in making successful business decisions, which I personally found quite enlightening. And more recently, I took another course on AI for lawyers, which was very illuminating in comprehending the use of AI in the legal world, alongside, of course, its corresponding challenges. Okay, now speaking of AI, this is the perfect moment to transition to tip number 7, which is embrace technology, but don't become enslaved by AI. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, you have likely heard about the numerous debates surrounding the use of AI in the legal profession, right from its sweeping impact on jobs to a number of ethical, copyright, and privacy related concerns. And while AI has profoundly transformed the manner in which certain kinds of legal work, particularly I would say research and writing, are performed, it is to my mind no substitute for a highly skilled, analytical, and empathetic lawyer. Just remember that a lot of tech savvy clients these days have already looked up their query, their legal query on AI, that is, before approaching you for legal advice. So if you're merely going to parrot what AI feeds you without applying your mind critically, the client may lose trust in you, leading to a significant embarrassment, not just for you, but for the firm, right? So my advice is use AI as a supplement to your own research and writing and not as a substitute. There have been many concerns, in fact, about the accuracy of results that AI has generated in the past, and hence it's very crucial that you fact check everything that is AI generated. But there are certainly some compelling use cases for AI, right? For instance, checking grammatical errors and inconsistencies in a draft, creating a document skeleton or summary, or receiving feedback on the tone of an email or certain aspects of your contract draft. And I must say it's fairly good at such tasks. But always remember, there will be limitations in what AI can achieve, howsoever sophisticated it is or becomes. Now, as you can see from this Washington Post article on the slide, and in fact, several subsequent articles written on this subject, AI tends to hallucinate and could make up legal cases and research leads that don't exist. In fact, this has caused many lawyers in the US to be fined and fired. In fact, a recent study by MIT this year highlighted quite an alarming finding. Okay, it actually showed increased cognitive decline and lessened brain activity among students who relied consistently on ChatGPT for a few months. So, on balance, the upshot of all this is please use AI as an assistant and not as an unimpeachable authority. And don't lose your own authentic voice and creativity while employing AI. Okay. Now, strategy number 8 is to exhibit professionalism in your communication and behavior. And trust me, this is the one aspect that could literally make or break your career. And over the years, I have realized that this quality of professionalism is far more important than having an impressive CV or glittering educational qualifications. Now, of course, professionalism is a very subjective word and may mean different things to different people. But I have outlined a few pointers here that personally matter to me when evaluating interns. So first and foremost, displaying integrity in your conduct is an absolute non-negotiable. For example, being honest to your colleagues and seniors, saying that you genuinely don't have an immediate answer to a question, owning up to mistakes, and standing up for the truth no matter how uncomfortable it may be. In fact, in your career, you will encounter situations when clients ask you to bend the rules or act unscrupulously, but you must demonstrate your professional integrity by holding your ground and not caving in. In such situations, and also in cases where you're dealing with gray areas in law, I always advise using the front page test, okay, which many professionals routinely employ to resolve ethical conundrums. So what is this test, you may ask? Essentially, if you are contemplating a course of action, but are not sure about whether it's ethical or not, you should take a step back and ask yourself, would I be comfortable if this course of action was reported on the front page of a newspaper and read by my family, friends, and acquaintances? If the answer is a no, don't proceed with it. And also, using this front page test, explain to your clients how their reputation would suffer if their proposed actions were made public, either through news outlets or social media. I have personally observed that most sensible clients will reconsider and change their course of action after understanding the impact of such negative consequences. And even if they don't, at least you can take comfort in knowing that you have done your part by guiding them in the right direction and upholding your own professional integrity. Now, apart from integrity, another critical trait is punctuality. Now, I totally understand that there are situations where a deadline cannot be met and has to be pushed, right? In such situations, it's very crucial to make the right kind of communication to your senior or client. Unfortunately, oftentimes we notice that such communications are handled very sloppily, or worse yet, the intern just goes to senior. And of course, this behavior is going to be perceived very adversely, right? So, my suggestion is that when you ask for a deadline extension, always explain the justification for it. For example, the scope of work turned out to be much more expansive than you initially anticipated, or a health emergency has intervened, right? After all, we are humans at the end of the day. And always be ready with an answer on what you have achieved thus far. For example, you have research judgments on point X, but have not had the time to complete the exercise for point Y. That way, your senior client knows that while you have asked for a deadline extension, you have not been slacking off. Now, the next vital characteristic that I want to discuss is meticulousness. So, if you as an intern reference the right research resources in your work, draft diligently, and spot the tiniest errors and inconsistencies in a document, you're sure to stand out. In fact, such a commitment to excellence also builds trust and encourages your seniors to delegate high stakes matters to you in the future. And the last soft skill outlined on the slide is empathy. And I cannot emphasize this enough because even a lawyer with excellent technical skills can lose clients if he or she doesn't have this trait. So, being a good listener, refraining from screaming and yelling, howsoever aggravating your client, opponent, or colleague is, and picking your battles wisely are all hallmarks of an empathetic lawyer. And there is no doubt, of course, that you have to be assertive sometimes to get your point across. But you don't have to treat every negotiation as a zero-sum game and a screaming match. Always remember that your opponent today could become your client or employer tomorrow. All right. And finally, please avoid using tone deaf language in your emails or other communications. So I used to know a lawyer who drafted such aggressive emails that even if the counterparty had no plans to escalate the matter, the tone of the email alone would push the counterparty to contemplate litigation. So instead of dousing the fire, this lawyer would end up fanning the flames. And this is something that you should absolutely avoid. In fact, in a high stress situation, always pause and reflect before sending out an email. And examine the tone and language that you have employed. And think, if this email were to be read out before a court of law, how would it reflect on me and my client? This kind of reflection will generally ensure that your communication remains professional and respectful. Moving on to the ninth strategy, which is to showcase initiative and a spirit of volunteering. And what I mean by showcasing initiative is essentially expressing an eagerness to learn new things, being diligent, and volunteering to take the lead with work, especially challenging assignments. Now, I can tell you from personal experience, this quality goes a long way in forming a lasting impression on your seniors. So whether it's doing that piece of tax research that most juniors would shy away from, or helping with the firm's long-term goals like standardizing agreements or technology integration, taking initiative basically shows that you are willing to go that extra mile. And it thereby opens up doors for future leadership opportunities at the firm. And of course, there will be countless occasions for you to lend a hand for tasks like making presentations, writing articles and newsletters, and conducting research for conferences and publications. And there is absolutely no dearth of topics to write on or research for you. You could track legal developments in areas that your generation is particularly well versed with. So AI, social media, the influencer ESG, data protection, privacy, the gig economy, cryptocurrency. All these topics are relatively new and rapidly evolving fields. And above all, I cannot emphasize enough on the value of engaging in pro bono work, whenever the opportunity arises. I think it not only enables you to give back to society, but also makes you a far more empathetic and well-rounded professional. In fact, I can personally gladly vouch for the fact that some of my most valuable lessons in law have come from matters that haven't earned me a single cent. And now coming to the last and arguably the most indispensable strategy, which is to prioritize our mental and physical well-being. So as lawyers, we are in a people-facing profession and are bound to encounter all kinds of personality. And honestly, not all of them will be pleasant, right? I'm sure those of you of intern have already got a flavor of this. So whether it's a difficult client, a combative opponent, or a very temperamental senior, these challenges unfortunately come with the territory of being a lawyer. And this is precisely why developing a thick skin and building resilience is so important. And now I know it's easier said than done. For a lot of us, me included, especially, those who are sensitive by nature, it's very much a work in progress. But what has really helped me over the years is to understand how to separate the message from the tone. So let me explain by way of an example. Say you receive a very harshly worded email from a client, right? Instead of letting the tone affect you emotionally, try to filter out any constructive feedback that may be buried in there. Something you can actually learn from and use going forward. But if there is no real feedback, it's just negativity, let it go. Don't let it hijack your mood or your day, right? In fact, in my experience, more often than not, the tone people use has less to do with you and more to do with what they are going through at the moment. So maybe your boss was just berated by a client and, ends up snapping at you for something minor. It's not fair, but it happens, right? The key is to not internalize it or let it ruin your self-confidence. However, never ever tolerate toxic or abusive behavior, howsoever junior you are, okay? I have noticed that a lot of times juniors are expected to grin and bear toxic behavior of their seniors, either because it's considered some kind of rite of passage or even, simply out of the fear of losing their job. But to my mind, no title or job in the world is worth losing your mental peace, self-worth, or importantly, health over. So let me assure you here that there are a fair number of humane and respectful employers for you in the job market. And that brings me to the next point, which is to seek a mentor. This could very well be someone within your firm or even outside it. What matters is that it is someone you trust who will shepherd you through the highs and lows of being a lawyer. And this could be by helping you navigate tough situations, offering encouragement, and of course, feedback when needed. Another important point is to always keep the big picture in mind. Okay. Even in the most challenging roles or circumstances, ask yourself, what has this experience taught me? What skills have I gained? And how can I translate it into something meaningful on my CV? For example, is the internship that I'm doing a stepping stone towards an LL.M, or is it moving me closer to an in-house role? Whatever your long-term goal may be, of course. Keeping track of that big picture can help you feel motivated and help you move forward with clarity and purpose. Otherwise, it's very easy to feel weighed down by frustration, particularly if you're operating in an unstructured environment with little to no guidance, and of course, a very modest stipend, right? Which is the case for a majority of interns, unfortunately. And then, of course, taking care of your health with good nutrition and sleep and any form of physical activity is a must. See, to my mind, even a walk for a few minutes can sometimes really help clear out one's mind. And simple deep breathing exercises can be done anywhere, anytime for free. Some people find reading to be therapeutic, some seek refuge in playing or listening to music. And for many, traveling, even for short periods, lifts their spirits. So the key is to find whatever routine or hobby or hobbies work for you and to stay consistent with it. Without that, of course, it's just all too easy to slip into burnout even before you realize it. Now, speaking of burnout, I'm actually reminded of an incident from many years ago. So I'd walked into a women's restroom and I heard this very heated discussion coming out from one of its corners. And before I could even make sense of what was going on, I realized that the female colleague was on a conference call negotiating a transaction from inside the bathroom. She was so caught up in the work that even taking a 5 minutes break had become a luxury for her. And this was not a one-off incident for her, unfortunately. It was just how she had begun to operate day in and day out. Now, obviously, dedication to work is admirable, but an incident like that is also a stark reminder that if you don't set your boundaries as a professional, someone else will. And unfortunately, the result is often burnout. So, always be intentional about setting your boundaries to preserve your sanity and well being. Now, before I conclude this presentation, I would like to draw your attention to some simple exercises that I've listed on this slide, which you could begin right away to set yourself up for a successful internship. You may, of course, feel free to pause the video and read these exercises in detail later. They are largely based on the tips that I've shared in the previous slides. So here's a quick summary of what you can do. Firstly, start by identifying the laws most relevant to your firm's practice areas and explore some reliable resources, articles, videos, even a good course, and make notes of the key takeaways. That's very important. Secondly, pick a landmark judgment and try summarizing it in your own words. Then compare your version with how a top law firm presents it on its blog. Thirdly, practice a basic contract drafting exercise. Something as simple as a consultant agreement is a great place to begin with, but you could obviously choose any other agreement which may be relevant to your work. Fourthly, try writing a short article on a legal topic that interests you. Share it with a professor or a mentor and use AI tools if you need to get feedback on your draft. And lastly, practice some deep breathing techniques and think of other relaxation activities that you would like to incorporate in your schedule while interning. Now, as I wrap up this presentation, I would like to leave you with a very popular quote from Charles Dickens, which, to my mind, perfectly encapsulates an internship journey in a law firm. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. I think this quote is quite emblematic of the ups and downs and peaks and valleys that your internship journey will entail. Some days you may feel absolutely on top of the world for cracking a very complex legal problem. And on other days, you may question everything you know. And let me tell you, that's all very much part of the deal. However, I truly hope that by adopting some of the strategies that I've shared with you today, you will experience a lot more professional fulfillment than setbacks and build a robust foundation for a long and rewarding legal career. And above everything else, I earnestly hope that you also have some fun along the way as you navigate this very interesting roller coaster ride. And with that, I would like to say thank you to all the participants for your time and attention and truly wish you all the very best. A special thanks to Tanisha, Rishita, Shravani, Diva, and all the other members of the placement committee for all their hard work in organizing this lecture. Thank you again.
The Placement Committee would like to express its sincere gratitude to Ms. Parinaz Madan for taking the time to share her invaluable insights on the topic Strategies for Becoming a Standout Law Firm Intern. Your session was both enlightening and thought provoking, one that highlighted diverse approaches to internships. Your deep understanding of this topic, paired with your extensive experience, has provided us with invaluable insights for our internships. This has inspired us to consider how we, as future law professionals, can effectively navigate these crucial years. We would like to extend a heartfelt gratitude to our principal, Dr. Smita Vaidya ma'am, whose constant guidance has been an invaluable support for our committee's journey. We would also like to express our sincere gratitude to our founder and professor in charge, Professor H.D. Pitawala, along with our assistant professors in charge, Professor Rahul Doble, Professor Rahul Gangurde, and our placement training officer, Professor Sangram Jadhav, for their constant support and guidance. We would once again like to express a heartfelt thanks to Ms. Madan for her generosity in sharing her profound expertise with us. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Most welcome, Shravani. Thank you again. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am.